I was 37 weeks pregnant, gripping the hospital bed rails so hard my knuckles turned white, when my mother-in-law Lorraine looked me dead in the eye and said, "Real women don't make this much noise during childbirth." The contraction that was ripping through my body made me want to scream even louder, but her cold stare made me bite my lip until I tasted blood. My husband Russell, the man who promised to love and support me through everything, stood right beside her, arms crossed, checking his phone like I was inconveniencing him with my pain. "You know, Beth," he said without even looking up from his screen, "Meredith barely made a sound when she gave birth. The doctors said they'd never seen someone handle it so gracefully. Maybe you're just being a bit dramatic." The nurses in the room exchanged shocked glances. Nurse Patricia, who'd been adjusting my monitor, actually stopped what she was doing to stare at him. The younger nurse, Amber, looked like she wanted to say something but held her tongue. I could see the disbelief written across both their faces. Here I was, 7 centimeters dilated, no epidural because the anesthesiologist was stuck in an emergency C-section, and my husband was comparing me to his ex-girlfriend while his mother stood there nodding in agreement. "Russell deserves better than this performance," Lorraine added, her voice dripping with disdain as she clutched her designer purse. "When I gave birth to him, I didn't make a single sound, not one. That's what real mothers do. They endure." Another contraction hit, and this time I couldn't hold back the cry that escaped my lips. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It felt like my entire body was being pulled apart from the inside. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to breathe through it, tried to find some position that would give me even a moment's relief. Russell actually rolled his eyes at me. He rolled his eyes at his wife, who was about to deliver his child. That's when we heard it. A small knock on the door, barely audible over the beeping machines and my labored breathing. Then came the voice that would change everything, the innocent voice of my 7-year-old son, Timothy, from my first marriage. "Daddy, Mommy, Mrs. Henderson had to leave for her doctor appointment. Can I come in?" "No, buddy," Russell called out, his voice suddenly switching to that fake cheerful tone he used when other people were around. "Wait outside just a few more minutes. Mommy's busy right now." "But Daddy," Timothy's voice was insistent, carrying through the door with the determination only a 7-year-old could muster. "Should I tell them about what you told Mommy on the phone last night? About the paper you need her to sign? You said it was really important and that she had to do it right after the baby comes." The room went completely silent except for the steady beep of the fetal monitor and my ragged breathing. I watched Russell's face transform from annoyance to something I'd never seen before, pure absolute terror. The color drained from his skin so fast I thought he might faint. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the linoleum floor. Lorraine's smug expression froze, her mouth slightly open as she turned to stare at her son. "What paper?" I managed to ask between panted breaths, my hand instinctively moving to my belly as another contraction began to build. Russell's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time since I'd met him, my smooth-talking, always ready with an answer husband was completely speechless. His eyes darted between me, his mother, and the door, where our 7-year-old son stood waiting, holding the key to a secret that was about to destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. My name is Bethany, and at 35 I thought I'd finally gotten my happy ending. After my first husband, Michael, passed away in a car accident when Timothy was just 2, I spent years focusing solely on being a mom and working part-time at our local library in Columbus, Ohio. The days were quiet, filled with storytime sessions for toddlers and helping elderly patrons find large print mysteries. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful, and after the chaos of losing Michael, peace was all I wanted. Then Russell walked into my life during a community book club meeting at the library. It was a Thursday evening in September, and we were discussing some forgettable thriller when this well-dressed man in a perfectly pressed suit walked in 20 minutes late, apologizing profusely with a smile that could have sold ice to Eskimos. He worked in insurance sales, he explained, and his meeting had run over. The way he commanded the room's attention should have been my first warning sign, but loneliness has a way of making red flags look like simple quirks. He pursued me with the kind of intensity that felt like romance in the movies. flowers delivered to the library every Friday, surprise lunch dates where he'd show up with Timothy's favorite chicken nuggets along with my salad, weekend trips to the zoo where he'd carry Timothy on his shoulders for hours without complaint. My son, who'd been so withdrawn since losing his father, started laughing again. He started calling Russell Daddy after just 6 months, and I felt my broken heart beginning to mend. "You saved us," I told Russell the night he proposed, exactly 1 year after we met. We were at the same restaurant where we'd had our first date, and Timothy was staying with my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. "Timothy and I were just existing before you came along." "You saved me too," Russell said, slipping the ring onto my finger. It was a massive diamond, far bigger than anything I would have chosen for myself. A bachelor at 37, living in a cramped apartment, no real purpose in life. You gave me a family, Beth, a reason to be better. We married 4 months later in a small ceremony. Russell insisted on paying for everything, even though I tried to explain I had money saved from Michael's life insurance policy. His mother, Lorraine, flew in from Florida for the wedding, and while she seemed cold during our first meeting, Russell assured me she just needed time to warm up to people. "Mom's protective," he explained. "I'm her only child, and after what Diane did to me, she's cautious about new people in my life." Diane was Russell's ex-wife, who'd supposedly left him for a wealthy real estate developer, breaking his heart and taking half his savings in the divorce. He talked about her exactly twice, both times after a few drinks, and I could see how much the betrayal still hurt him. I promised myself I'd never cause him that kind of pain. The topic of children came up immediately after our honeymoon. Russell wanted a baby right away, which surprised me since he'd been so good with Timothy. I thought we'd wait a year or two, let Timothy adjust to having a stepfather officially, but Russell was insistent. "I love Timothy like my own," he said one night as we lay in bed, his hand on my stomach. "But I need a child of my own blood, Beth. Someone who carries my DNA, my family legacy. Can you understand that?" I wanted to say that Timothy was his family now, that blood shouldn't matter, but the desperate look in his eyes stopped me. This man had taken on a widow and her son without hesitation. The least I could do was give him a biological child. We started trying immediately, and I was pregnant within 3 months. That's when Lorraine announced she was moving in temporarily. Her condo in Florida was being renovated, she claimed, and hotels were so impersonal. Russell didn't even discuss it with me first, just came home one day and said his mother would be staying in our guest room for a few months. "She can help with Timothy while you're dealing with morning sickness," he said, as if it was already decided. The morning sickness was brutal, lasting well past the first trimester. While I hunched over the toilet, Lorraine would stand in the doorway, shaking her head and muttering about weak constitutions. She had a story for everything, and they all seemed to involve how much better Russell's ex-girlfriend, Meredith, had been at everything. Meredith used to make Russell fresh juice every morning, even when she was 8 months pregnant, Lorraine would say as I struggled to keep down a piece of toast. She ran 3 miles a day until the week before delivery. Some women are just built differently, I suppose. Russell never defended me during these comparisons. He'd just shrug and change the subject, leaving me to wonder if he secretly agreed with his mother's assessments. The contractions started at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in late March. I woke Russell gently, trying not to disturb him too much since he always complained about losing sleep. He groaned and pulled a pillow over his head when I told him it was time. 20 minutes later, when the contractions were coming every 8 minutes, I had to practically drag him out of bed. "Can't this wait until morning?" he grumbled, checking his phone. "I have the Henderson policy presentation at 9. It's a $50,000 account, Beth." I stared at him in disbelief as another contraction gripped my body. "Russell, the baby is coming. Your child is being born today." He sighed dramatically while pulling on his clothes, muttering about bad timing and how Meredith had given birth on a weekend like a considerate person. I bit my tongue, focusing on my breathing as we woke Timothy and dropped him at Mrs. Henderson's house next door. Russell called her back around noon to bring Timothy to the hospital, saying the boy should be there when his sibling arrived, though I suspected he just didn't want to pay Mrs. Henderson for a full day of babysitting. By 3 p.m., I was in active labor in room 302 of Riverside Methodist Hospital, and the pain was beyond anything I could have imagined. The epidural I'd carefully planned for wasn't happening because the only anesthesiologist on duty was dealing with an emergency C-section down the hall. Each contraction felt like my spine was being crushed in a vice while someone set my insides on fire. The nice breathing exercises from prenatal class were useless against this level of agony. Nurse Patricia, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, checked my dilation for what felt like the 100th time. 7 centimeters, honey. You're doing great. The anesthesiologist should be free soon. Please, I gasped, gripping the bed rails as another wave of pain crashed over me. I can't do this much longer without something for the pain. That's when Lorraine decided to share her expertise. She had been sitting in the corner chair for the past hour, texting on her phone and occasionally making disapproving sounds. Now she stood up, straightened her expensive blazer, and walked to the foot of my bed with her designer purse still hanging from her elbow, like she was at a business meeting instead of a delivery room. You know, Bethany, I delivered Russell with no medication whatsoever, she announced, her voice carrying that superior tone I'd grown to hate over the past months. Didn't make a single sound the entire time. The nurses said they'd never seen anything like it. That's what real women do. We endure silently. I was mid-contraction, tears streaming down my face, sweat soaking through the hospital gown. Lorraine, please, this isn't helping right now. Oh, stop the theatrics, she interrupted, waving her manicured hand dismissively. You're scaring the nurses with all this screaming and carrying on. It's embarrassing, frankly. Nurse Amber, a younger woman who'd been adjusting my IV, froze with her hand on the tube. Her eyes widened as she looked between Lorraine and me, clearly shocked by what she was hearing. Even Nurse Patricia stopped writing on my chart to stare at my mother-in-law. Russell finally looked up from his phone where he'd been scrolling through emails for the past hour. She's right, Beth. When Meredith had our baby, she barely made a sound. The doctors said they'd never seen someone handle labor so gracefully. She did yoga poses between contractions. Maybe if you'd stayed more active during pregnancy, like I suggested, this would be easier. Your wife is in active labor without pain medication, Nurse Patricia said firmly, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. Every woman experiences labor differently, and there's no shame in expressing pain. Some women are just stronger, Lorraine cut her off with a condescending smile. My Russell deserves a wife who can handle life's challenges without falling apart and making a scene. This is just childbirth, not a tragedy. Another contraction hit, stronger than before, and I couldn't help but cry out. The pain radiated from my back through my entire body, and I felt like I was being torn in half. Russell actually rolled his eyes and let out an annoyed sigh, like I was inconveniencing him with my suffering. Maybe we should have had the baby at the birthing center Meredith used, he said to his mother, not even trying to lower his voice. They teach women proper breathing techniques there and how to maintain composure. This is just chaos. That's when we heard the small knock on the door, 3 gentle taps that somehow cut through all the tension in the room. Everyone turned toward the sound as Timothy's little voice called out from the hallway. Daddy, Mommy, Mrs. Henderson had to leave for her doctor appointment. The nurse at the desk said you were in room 302. Can I come in? No, buddy, Russell called back, his voice suddenly switching to that fake cheerful tone he used when we were around other people. It was completely different from the disgusted voice he'd been using with me moments before. Wait outside just a few more minutes, okay? Mommy's busy having the baby. But Daddy, Timothy's voice was insistent, the way it got when he had something important to say. Should I tell them about what you told Mommy on the phone last night? About the paper you need her to sign? You said it was really, really important and that she had to do it right after the baby comes. The room went completely silent except for my labored breathing and the steady beep of the fetal monitor. I watched Russell's face transform in a way I'd never seen before. The color drained from his skin so fast that he looked like he might pass out. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the linoleum floor, the screen cracking on impact. Even Lorraine's smug expression faltered, her eyes darting to her son with obvious concern. What paper? I managed to ask between contractions, pushing myself up slightly on the bed despite the pain shooting through my body. It's nothing, Russell said quickly, practically jumping toward the door, his Voice had gone up an octave, and sweat was beading on his forehead. Timothy's confused. You know how kids mix things up? He probably heard me talking about insurance paperwork for the baby. No, I'm not confused, Timothy called out, his voice taking on that stubborn tone I knew so well. You were in the garage talking on your phone, Daddy. You didn't know I was there getting my bike to put it away like you asked. You said she'll sign it right after delivery when she's exhausted. She won't even read it. Then the house will be in my name only and Mom can help us invest the equity like we planned. My blood ran cold despite the sweat covering my body. The house. My house. The one I'd bought with Michael's life insurance money, the one I'd foolishly added Russell's name to after we married, but kept primarily in my name because something in my gut had told me to protect it. My aunt had insisted on that small protection, and I'd thought she was being paranoid. Lorraine's face went rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line. Russell, what is the child talking about? But something in her voice told me she knew exactly what Timothy was talking about. Nurse Patricia looked at me with deep concern, stepping closer to my bedside. Mrs. Bethany, are you aware of any documents your husband wants you to sign? My mind raced despite the pain racking my body. Everything started clicking into place like puzzle pieces I'd been too blind to see. Russell's insistence on having a baby immediately after we married, his mother's convenient extended visit, the way he'd been asking subtle questions about refinancing the house for the past month, saying we could get better rates. Timothy, I called out, my voice stronger now despite another contraction building. What else did Daddy say on the phone? Russell lunged for the door handle. This is ridiculous. The boy doesn't understand adult conversations. He's 7 years old, for God's sake. I understand plenty. Timothy's voice was defiant now, and I could picture his little face scrunched up in determination. You also said that once Mommy signs it, you and Grandma Lorraine could use the house money for your new business, and that Meredith would stop calling about the money you owe her. You said $40,000 3 times, and you sounded really mad about it. Nurse Amber actually gasped. Nurse Patricia's hand moved to her phone in her pocket. I felt another contraction building, but rage was overtaking the pain, giving me a clarity I hadn't felt in months. You also said something about someone named Diane, Timothy continued, his voice carrying clearly through the door. You told the person on the phone that you and Grandma Lorraine did the same thing to Diane and it worked perfectly, but Meredith was too smart and wouldn't put your name on anything. The room erupted. Russell tried to pull the door open, but Nurse Patricia stepped in front of him with surprising speed for her age. Sir, I think you need to stay right where you are and explain this to your wife. Russell's face contorted with panic as he tried to push past Nurse Patricia. But she stood firm, her 20 years of dealing with difficult situations in the delivery ward showing in her steady stance. Sir, you need to calm down right now or I'm calling security. This is insane, Russell shouted, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking completely. You're going to believe a 7-year-old kid over me? He doesn't know what he heard. I know exactly what I heard. Timothy's voice came through the door, loud and clear. You said Mommy was too trusting and that's why this would work. You said she was just like Diane, always wanting to believe the best in people. And Grandma Lorraine laughed and said 3 times would be the charm. Lorraine grabbed her purse and moved toward the door. We don't have to listen to this nonsense. Russell, we're leaving. Actually, you're not going anywhere, Nurse Patricia said, pulling out her phone. I'm calling security and administration. This sounds like attempted fraud, and given that Mrs. Bethany is in active labor and potentially about to be coerced into signing documents while under duress, we have a duty to protect our patient. You can't do this, Russell's voice cracked as he spun toward me. Beth, baby, you know I love you. The kid is confused. I would never do anything to hurt you. Tell them. Tell them about us, about our love story. I looked at him through the tears streaming down my face, but these weren't tears of pain anymore. They were tears of fury and heartbreak and the crushing realization that everything had been a lie. Our love story? You mean the one where you targeted a widow with a life insurance payout and a paid-off house? Mommy, Timothy called through the door. Can I come in now? I'm scared. Let him in, I told Nurse Amber, who looked at Nurse Patricia for confirmation. Just the boy, Nurse Patricia said firmly, still blocking Russell. You two stay right there. The door opened just enough for Timothy to squeeze through, and he ran straight to my bedside. His eyes were wide with worry, and he was clutching his iPad that Mrs. Henderson had given him to keep busy. "Mommy, are you okay? Did I do something wrong?" I reached out and touched his face, this brave little boy who had just saved us from financial ruin. "You did exactly right, baby. Remember what I taught you about secrets?" He nodded solemnly. "You said if someone asks me to keep a secret that could hurt someone, I should tell a trusted adult. And Daddy telling someone on the phone about tricking you could hurt you, so I had to tell." $40,000, I said, looking directly at Russell. "That's what you owe Meredith? For what, exactly?" Russell's mouth opened and closed, but Lorraine answered for him. "That gold digger has no right to that money. Russell invested it in good faith in a business opportunity that didn't pan out." "A business opportunity," I repeated slowly. "Like the one you wanted to invest the equity from my house into?" Security arrived then. 2 large men in uniform who took positions near Russell and Lorraine. Nurse Patricia quickly updated them on the situation, while Nurse Amber called for the on-call administrator. Within minutes, the room was full of hospital personnel, all focused on protecting me and my children. "I want them out," I said through gritted teeth as another contraction hit. "Both of them. They are not allowed in this room, near me or near my children." "You can't keep me from my child," Russell shouted, trying to push forward again, but security held him back. "I'm the father. I have rights." "You have the right to wait in the lobby or leave the premises," the administrator, a stern woman named Mrs. Chen, informed him. "The patient has the right to refuse visitors, and given what we've just heard, I strongly suggest you contact a lawyer instead of making a scene." "This is all a misunderstanding," Lorraine said, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "Bethany, dear, you're in pain. You're not thinking clearly. Russell loves you. We're family." "Family doesn't plot to steal houses," I managed to say between panted breaths. "Family doesn't compare you to ex-girlfriends while you're in labor. Family doesn't wait until you're at your most vulnerable to strike." Security escorted them both out, Russell shouting threats about custody and lawsuits, while Lorraine hissed about ungrateful women who didn't know their place. Their voices faded down the hallway as another contraction hit, but this time, Timothy held my hand and told me I was the bravest mommy in the whole world. 2 hours later, I delivered a healthy baby girl with Timothy, holding my hand the entire time. He never let go, not once, even when things got intense. Nurse Patricia stayed 3 hours past her shift to make sure I was okay, and Nurse Amber brought Timothy juice boxes and crackers from the staff room, treating him like the hero he was. When my daughter finally arrived, screaming and perfect, Timothy was the first to notice she had his eyes. "She's got the same eyes as me, Mommy," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Does that mean she's really my sister, even though Russell is her dad?" "She's absolutely your sister," I told him, tears streaming down my face as I held her for the first time. "Blood doesn't determine family, love does, and you're going to be the best big brother in the world." Russell tried to come back that evening around 8 o'clock. I heard his voice in the hallway putting on his charming act, telling anyone who would listen that his wife was having postpartum emotional issues and had misunderstood a conversation about refinancing. He came with flowers, expensive roses that probably cost $100, and a teddy bear for the baby. Security turned him away at the nurse's station. I'd specifically requested that he not be allowed anywhere near us, and the hospital took it seriously. Lorraine sent me a text an hour later calling me dramatic, ungrateful, and short-sighted. She said I'd regret this when I was raising 2 children alone, that no man would want a woman with 2 kids from different fathers, and that I was throwing away my only chance at a complete family. I read it once, showed it to the administrator for documentation purposes, then blocked her number from my hospital bed while nursing my daughter. The next morning, my cousin Angela, who worked as a divorce attorney in Cleveland, drove down with a briefcase full of documents. She arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, still in her pajamas under her coat because she'd left the moment I called her. We filed emergency protective orders that day from my hospital room, and she started divorce proceedings immediately. "How many times has he done this before?" I asked her as she reviewed the information Timothy had overheard. Angela looked up from her laptop where she'd been researching. "I found Diane Thompson. She lost her house in 2018 but was too ashamed to press charges. She thought she was in love. And Meredith Crawford was smarter. She never added his name to anything, which is why he moved on to you. The $40,000? Meredith confirmed he convinced her to invest in a business that never existed. She's been trying to get her money back for 2 years. With your testimony and Timothy's statement, she might finally have a case. Timothy sat next to me on the hospital bed, gently touching his baby sister's tiny fingers while she slept. He looked up at me with those serious eyes that had seen too much for a 7-year-old. "Mommy, are we going to be okay without Russell?" I pulled him closer, breathing in the scent of his hair, this precious boy who had saved us. "We were okay before him, sweetheart, and we'll be even better now. We have each other, and now we have Grace, too." That's what I named her, Grace. Because it was Grace that saved us, delivered in the form of a 7-year-old boy who knew right from wrong. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Russell got nothing. The house remained mine, and he was ordered to pay child support for Grace, though I knew I'd probably never see a penny. Diane came forward after hearing about my case, and together with Meredith, we filed criminal fraud charges. Russell and Lorraine were arrested 2 weeks before Grace's first Christmas. Lorraine tried to contact me once through a mutual acquaintance, claiming she didn't know about Russell's plan, that she was a victim too. But Timothy remembered something else from that phone call, something he told the detective later. He'd heard Grandma Lorraine in the background saying, 3 times would be the charm, and this one has more money than the other 2 combined. The universe has a funny way of protecting us sometimes. Mine came in the form of a 7-year-old boy who knew that some secrets are meant to be told, that speaking up for someone who can't protect themselves is the bravest thing you can do. Grace is 2 now, and Timothy is 9. He's the best big brother anyone could ask for, and every night when I tuck him in, I remind him that his courage saved our family. Real women don't stay silent when they're in pain, physical or emotional. Real women protect their children and themselves, and sometimes that protection comes from the smallest, bravest voice in the room. Real strength isn't about suffering in silence. It's about knowing when to roar. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your comments mean the world to me, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories every week.